Welcome back. As we discussed, China and Russia have conducted a week of joint naval exercises. Warships, submarines and aircraft took part in the joint Sea 2014 drills. How does each nation stand to benefit from this? How does this affect geopolitics in Europe and the United States? To discuss all this, I'm joined in the studio by Chris Chivvis, a political scientist at the RAND Corporation, Vasily Kashin, a senior research fellow from the Center for Analysis and Strategies and Technologies, joins us from Moscow, and from Beijing we have Zhou Jingxing, a counselor at the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Vasily, let me start with you. These exercises that are taking place or have just been completed in the region, ships, submarines, aircraft involved. It comes at a time when there are tensions in the region over China's territorial claims, over pushback from Japan. There's tensions with Vietnam right now and complaints from the Philippines. So what are these two sides trying to achieve here?
Well, these exercises have nothing to do with China's territorial disputes with the neighbors, because Russia has no position on these disputes. Russia is not supporting any side of these disputes. Rather, Russia and China are continuing a trend to increasing military interoperability. It's not aimed against anyone, but it's aimed on increasing understanding of each other's capabilities, increasing the ability to work together. For example, during these exercises, for the first time, a joint battle group was created, which operated under single command, implemented certain tasks. That's a new level of interoperability. The same trend is continuing during our ground-based exercises, which are also taking place every year.
All right, let's get the view from Beijing. Zhou Jingxing, what kind of message is China sending to the rest of the world, to the rest of the region, particularly to the United States, when we see exercises of this kind?
Well, I think that the exercise is the exercise by itself, and China is trying to, the message, if there is, that China is trying to send, would be that China is enjoying a good relationship with Russia, which is Chinese and the Russian presidents have agreed to build the partnership of comprehensive and strategic coordination, which naturally military mil-to-mil relationship is a part of it. So I think again that I agree with the gentleman from Moscow that this relationship or this military drill is not directed against any third party. And besides, China-Russia relations are pretty good, but it is still not a military alliance. And also, I think that China believes that the territorial disputes are disputes between China and the relevant countries, and they should be settled on a bilateral basis. So I doubt that there will be any intention from the Chinese side to invite a third force to get involved in it.
Okay, Christopher, not directed at any third party. How will all of this be viewed in the United States? Washington has expressed concerns before, particularly over Beijing's increase in the military budget.
Well, I think people take it seriously here in Washington, but I do think that also there is a recognition that it's important not to exaggerate the importance of any one military exercise, or even for that matter, the importance of any one economic deal. Obviously, it's a good moment for Russia right now. The timing is good because they're trying to demonstrate that they still have some friends in the world, given what they've been doing in Eastern Europe. But I think that there are limits to the extent to which China and Russia can form a long-term strategic partnership. I mean, take for example, this is a naval exercise that we've been talking about here, but of course we have a crisis going on in the South China Sea right now between China and Vietnam, a country to which Russia has promised a very significant number of arms sales. So I think that if you look down the road, this is going to seem more like a moment in time than something that's really a very lasting and game-changing kind of a relationship.
Right, so it's far more complex than just kind of us and them, black and white kind of situation. Yeah. Let me go back to Beijing. Zhou Jingxing, President Xi said only a few days ago that he wants to overhaul Chinese military and, in the words of the New York Times, project power across the Pacific and face regional rivals like Japan in defense of Chinese interests. Is the New York Times correct here?
Well, I haven't read that report from the New York Times, but I think that what the president is sending out to the rest of the world is that China is very firm on the protection of its national interest. And in this case, of course, it's territorial integrity. And I think that is the message that actually the whole of the Chinese leadership is trying to send.
Christopher, when we look at these developments, I mean, to what extent do they have to do with Washington's pivot to Asia, as it's been called, or in other forums we've seen it being called the rebalancing, moving more military assets into the Pacific as well? To what extent is this kind of exercise seen as a response to that?
Well, I mean, I think that it's not seen as a response to that. I mean, to be honest, I think that's more a question for the Chinese, to ask them whether or not the pivot to Asia, the rebalancing to Asia, is in any way driving the effort to build a relationship with a country like Russia. But obviously, the rebalancing to Asia is something that is going to be part of American policy looking ahead into not only the short term, but also the medium and likely the long term. There's a pretty big consensus, I think, here in Washington that the Asia-Pacific region is economically dynamic and it's going to be where many of the important events of the 21st century are played out. And naturally, the United States wants to have a role in that.
Okay, well, let's go to Beijing. Zhou Jingxing. Is this a response to the American pivot to Asia?
Well, I would say that, well, I think that the American pivot to Asia, or the United States has actually stopped using that word, instead using it as the rebalancing. As many people in China see this, we believe that there should be actually a rebalancing of this policy. That is because that so far we have seen that the rebalancing to Asia has been more focused on the security and military aspect. And the United States has been saying that it is an all-encompassing rebalancing toward Asia, economic and social and things like that. So we are yet to see more evidence in that regard. So I think that, and certainly this military exercise or China-Russia relationship is not a direct response to the rebalancing strategy of the United States, because China-Russia relationship has been developing for years. And this partnership has been started to build since 2011, or even if you trace back since 1996, so long before the word pivot to Asia came out.
Right, Vasily, as we've just heard there, the Chinese-Russian relationship has been building for years, but I'm wondering if this is an opportune moment for Russia, coming at a time when there are attempts by the United States and the European Union to isolate Russia. And I'm wondering, to what extent is this very convenient for Russia, coming at a time when NATO is expanding eastwards, as we've seen?
Well, I agree that all of the current trends in Russia-China military relations and as well as trends in China military development started long ago, long before President Obama declared his pivot to Asia policy. It started in 1990s, but currently a current crisis in our relations with United States and EU of course causes us to speed the things up. It adds political will and adds dynamics in our relations with China. All of the deals which has been negotiated for a long time are being sped up. Russia is no longer waiting for some better time or better conditions to achieve new deals with China. Russia will do as quickly as possible in every field, because no one knows, currently no one knows how long the crisis in our relations with the West will go on. There are expectations that it can possibly go on for decades, in fact.
And Christopher, does this kind of relationship that we see between the Chinese and the Russians on the one hand, the United States on the other hand, does it have the potential to raise tensions in the region?
I think it does have the potential to raise tensions in the region, but I guess what I've been trying to say is that my view is that there are some limitations to how far this Sino-Russian rapprochement, or the development of a deeper strategic relationship, can go. One of the reasons for that is if you look at it in geopolitical terms, China is clearly a rising power, a very dynamic economy that's going to have a significant role to play in the 21st century. Russia, on the other hand, is not a rising power. It may even be a declining power. So it's pretty clear that in this relationship, Russia is the lesser partner. And I think that's something that's going to be much more difficult and complicate the relationship as it tries to go forward.
Okay, we'll get the view from Moscow on what you've just said, but first we're going to have to take a break. We'll also talk next about the multi-billion-dollar gas deal between Russia and China and what it means for international business and trade. Stay with us here on The Heat.